electric study generally take, and who generally absorbs the cost if upgrades must be made to the electric grid, the developer or the electric provider?
Yeah, I'll take that. There's two different studies that we do: a preliminary planning and scoping study that takes anywhere from 60 to 90 days. If it takes longer, they pay for it. The minimum deposit's $75,000 plus $500 a megawatt, so it's a big investment to do that study. At the end of that study, they have 30 days if they want to proceed because it's preliminary, and then they go into a front-end engineering design study, which is just a more detailed study at the end of that. And again, they pay for it up front. It's based on the estimated cost of the study. At the end of that, they have 30 days to enter into a construction agreement to build whatever facilities may be required, and they are agreeing to pay for those costs, and they're agreeing to pay for them up front. So we don't want to put any burden on the co-op system. And again, I don't know if I explained it very well before, but the 19 co-ops, and Newberry obviously being one of those, they own us. So they tell us what to do to protect your communities. But we don't want any risk on you guys, ratepayers. If there's a generation need that's identified as a part of that study, they have to put financial assurances in place for that as well. And again, as I said earlier, that's very significant and can be a limiting factor in their decision making.
Okay. Based on your knowledge, I think, Chris, this would probably be for you. Based on your knowledge of data centers, have, if any, negative impacts occurred to wells, creeks, aquifers, or any downstream users, and what preventative measures can be put into place to mitigate environmental pollutants related to the data center?
Sure. There are, as with any large water user, there are certainly instances in this country of where data centers have impacted the groundwater availability or surface water availability. I cannot deny that. That's absolutely the case. A lot of times that is because they tapped into groundwater instead of tapping into municipal systems. So what you're seeing is many states are moving towards either at local level or at the state level. You're seeing states, Michigan did it just last year. They said that we are not going to allow for any groundwater or surface water withdrawal for data centers. Absolutely not. What we're going to say is that they can only tap into municipal systems, and after they've gone through, similar to the studies that they go through that Cole talked about on the electric side, they've gone through a water study as well to see whether the municipal system can support it.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there are certainly instances, but usually people are mitigating it through the type of municipal system.
All right, next question. What types of environmental studies are typically completed in the development of a site for an industry or a data center? And what types of public oversight and permitting processes are typically desired or required for data center development? You kind of touched on that a little earlier.
Yeah, if there's any transmission upgrades, we would have to do our standard environmental studies, historical studies, anything that we would normally do as a course of business, but I think the rest of the zoning and studies would be left to counties.
Sure, you're correct, Cole. So, a data center is a building just like any other building. So you're going to have the normal permits, erosion, sediment control. If there are wetlands impacts, you got to look at endangered species impacts just as if it was, again, any other thing. The only other extra permit that typically a data center requires is the air permit because of the generators. And that obviously is done at the state level.
What about the life expectancy of a data center?
Sure, I tried to touch on that a little bit. Again, most of these companies are making their decisions. They're planning to be there for a very long time. You don't spend several $1 billion and walk away from it in 5 years. But my advice there was that you have built into your plan some sort of way to look at how do you redevelop the asset. It does no longer be a data center just as you would anything else in development.
All right, back to an electrical question, Cole. Typically, what infrastructure upgrades and costs are required to meet the electrical needs? Who is typically held responsible for covering that, facility or the community?
The facility. Any major, and it's site dependent. A good site, it's $60 million. A less good site, it's hundreds of millions of dollars, and they pay it. They have deep pockets, and we're not going to ask you all to pay for it.
All right, I'm going to switch from the sheet that I had from the submitted questions earlier to one that was submitted downstairs. Whose data will be stored? Is it private, government, or build it and they will come?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the ultimate user. So whether it could be your photos on Apple, it could be Netflix, it could be banking data, it could be a government user. it's gonna depend on the user.
or a lot of the things you already mentioned?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is it likely or unlikely, based upon comparable data center placements in similar communities, that property taxes and electric bills for the existing residents or businesses will increase?
We're doing everything in our power to make sure that data centers do not drive increases.
On the property tax front, I think the property tax front, the universal answer is if that is the decision of the community to take the revenue to generate from data centers, that is used to reduce property tax.
And there are other avenues you could go. You mentioned that earlier. Do data centers, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so just because I heard it, right? I gotta be real careful. We're, yeah, I can't speak on it.
Oh, well, next year, fine.
So we want to adjust what we charge them to make sure that we cover all the risks. I mean, we're going to charge them more than your average consumer. We recognize the communities that we serve, and we want to protect you. And so that's what we're doing. That's what the co-ops have done.
All right, next question. Do data centers have any effect on cellular and Wi-Fi service for surrounding areas?
I'm not aware of any scientific evidence to that fact, or that presumption.
Okay. How do data centers affect nearby communities in terms of noise, lighting, air quality, and overall quality of life? Some of that was touched on earlier.
Yes, sir. There are impacts. I'm not going to deny it. Absolutely. There is noise, there are emissions, there's lighting, there's security, and that is something, water, absolute, power consumption, and everything to support it. What I do say is that is up to, obviously, state regulators and then the community to decide what is acceptable and what's not.
Okay. What cybersecurity, physical security, and operational reliability measures are typically used in small to medium data centers?
Sure, I'll talk about, obviously, cybersecurity is very important. Nobody wants their information compromised, and we all get upset when it happens. So you would hope that they have the highest possible cybersecurity standards that exist. And if, I'm sure the utility folks in this county can talk about, I'm sure the Newberry Public Utilities Agency gets hit dozens of times a day by cyber attacks. Most of them originating out of China, Russia, or Eastern Europe. So you want to make sure that these facilities are as secure as possible from a cyber perspective. There is physical security in most of these facilities, whether it's fencing or obviously on-site security that occurs, and obviously operational reliability. They have to be going 24/7. And that's why generators are important, and you have staff there 24/7 on 3 shifts to make sure that everything is working, because if something breaks, people get very upset.
Okay, next is a question from downstairs earlier, 2 parts. Who stands to gain long-term in the event of data center being built in Newberry? And why was the study being pushed so quickly when at least one council member stated in open session that he still needed to learn more about the impacts? The second part, I guess you'd have to ask the councilman.
Absolutely, Jody. That would be an answer for the question for elected officials. Who stands to benefit? I think there's both sides of it. Obviously, if you allow them to come in, there's the revenue that's generated from those data center facilities that, again, the community has to have the conversation about how to spend it. And I'll be candid, these companies, it is a business. It is a business. So obviously, they're not building data centers as a public charity. They're building it because of the statistics that I talked about earlier. It's because consumers are demanding it.
Okay. Typically, what operational efficiency standards are applied to data centers, water use, and cooling technologies? How will a data center affect our water supply, even if it's closed loop system? I think you touched on that.
Yeah, I touched on it, but I'll talk about a little bit more of the efficiency standards. Again, that's going to vary based on not only the user itself, but also based on state law or local requirements. Again, I'll go back to that Michigan experience that I talked about earlier. Not only on the water side are they mandating that companies can only tap into the missile system, but they are mandating that these data centers going forward within 3 years, they're going through a new certification process. They have to meet certain either LEED certification standards, green globes, US BREEAM standards, and other things with regards to the efficiency of those facilities, where they don't get to operate within the state. You're seeing that start to be mandated. Virginia's having that discussion right now with regards to how they link those operating standards to our sales and use tax exemption. So again, it's a matter of state law and local preference. And again, that is part of the community conversation that you should be having now.
All right, another question from downstairs earlier. Since the county does not yet know if the infrastructure can support the project, why are we voting to give a developer legal control of public land through an option before the feasibility studies are completed and made public? I think that's a question for...
And the only thing I'll go back to is this is part of the community conversation that should be held.
All right. In your experience, are data centers generally offered incentive packages? If so, what do these typically look like?
No, the co-op's not for profit. There's no incentives on the power side for data centers.
Aside from the power side, there are two principal sources of incentives for data centers. The first and foremost is South Carolina, like 40 other states, has a sales and use tax exemption on data center equipment. Just as there's a sales and use tax exemption on manufacturing equipment, because you don't tax the inputs to a product, you tax the output. So the South Carolina data center sales and use tax exemption says that a data center company, again under current law in South Carolina, that if a data center creates at least 25 jobs within 5 years of opening, and those jobs have to pay at least 150% of the state or county per capita wage in order to qualify. The company has to invest at least $50 million over 5 years that they do get the sales and use tax exemption. That exemption is set to expire on January 1, 2032. What you will see some data center companies ask for is what I'm sure y'all are familiar with, a FELO, a fee in lieu of taxation structure. That is not, the sales and use tax exemption is you meet those standards, you get it. A fee in lieu is decided locally, and it is negotiated. And so it is up to the community to decide whether you get it or not. The only other incentive that you typically see associated with data center companies is often they will work in partnership to develop that workforce pipeline that I talked about earlier.
Right, and this is not a question you can answer, but I want to throw it out there because it deals with fee in lieu. Are there any discussions about giving fee in lieu of taxes, property tax abatements, infrastructure assistance, or special revenue credits if the project advances? I don't think you can answer that question. That's a question for local government. Here's another question. What transparency and public reporting practices are commonly used for large data center projects and operations?
I would say the normal ones for all other industrial consumers. We don't have any special requirements for data centers that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I mean, a data center operator, when it comes to a community like any other economic development project, is typically going to ask for a non-disclosure agreement. Just as they will when they're working with the utility company, they're going to ask for some non-disclosure agreement during an initial period. That doesn't have to be granted, but it is typical in economic development. Obviously, that non-disclosure agreement does expire after some time, once the project obviously gets further along. If the project is allowed to go forward, there are obviously various permits that are required that I talked about earlier, erosion, the endangered species, all of those have public processes associated with them. Obviously, the air permit is something that obviously is very tightly reported on and monitored and has to be permitted by the state with the public notice and hearing requirements that go along with that.
Okay, another question from downstairs. What is the size of the facility? We don't really know that yet, I guess. How long will the facility be used? What is the power requirement? Water usage, noise pollution? What happens if the company bankrupts? Who cleans it up? Are there tax breaks? I think we've answered that as best we can at this moment. All right. And the final question I have, what other towns or counties were offered this and why did they turn it down? Newberry, I know, was not the first choice, end of quote.
Without a specific project, I don't know that we can answer it. I know that other communities are moving forward with data centers, yeah. Okay.
Well, folks, those are all the questions that were submitted. Some of those, well, you had an opportunity to submit the questions, and that's all. I can only read what I have here, and that's all I have. So the questions were submitted. We had 12 questions submitted online, and were more submitted, but a lot of those were repetitive.
With 50.
So,
We've been talking about community conversations. Where is our local government to talk about that?
I'm not in charge of your local government. And this is an information session, and it is now over.
Oh.